whisper of ice and fire. Game of Thrones, Season 7, Episode 3, The Queen's Justice, came out several weeks ago now, so let's dive right into the commentary. The episode opens with Jon and Sir Davos Seaworth arriving on Dragonstone to the company of Missandei of Narth and Tyrion Lannister. And as I previously mentioned, I am a huge fan of the mutual respect and just general, wishes of well-being that Tyrion and Jon hold for each other. And I'm glad that despite everything, they have not lost that camaraderie. I think they are two very well-written characters and two very thoroughly developed people in world. And then we have some interesting interactions in this scene between characters that were once on opposing sides. Tyrion and Davos. So in the Battle of Blackwater, back in Season 2, I believe, Tyrion's wildfire plan killed Davos' son, Mathos, I think his name was. And so, of course, any other character in Game of Thrones would be out seeking revenge or swearing vengeance upon Tyrion and all that. But although sad and upset at the time, Davos doesn't let it get in the way now. He knows that, well, for starters, they don't really have much of a position to sort of fight Tyrion for that. But also, the bigger picture is in mind. He came here for peace. They need help. His family died, but he has to man up and let the mission continue and not let his own feelings get in the way of that. So it's something interesting to think about, that he's sort of dealing with this, even though he may not show it. So yeah, Missandei and Tyrion are receiving Jon and Davos on Dragonstone on behalf of Daenerys. And there's something about Missandei. I know she's like really pretty and she's a good girl and a good guy, but you root for her and her team and that kind of thing. But she's always bothered me just because of the way she delivers her lines, and I can't tell if it's the character not being confident in herself or not truly believing in what she says, or if the actor is just a very stiff actor and can't deliver the lines cleanly and smoothly. I'm having trouble sort of describing what I mean, but let's see. Every time she sort of delivers Dany's orders and introduces her and on behalf of Queen Daenerys and lists all their titles and stuff, it's always super forced and just falsely confident. I can see right through it and see that Missandei is trying to be all proper and stand up straight and deliver these lines, but they're just so hollow, and I can't tell if it's the character or the actor, and that might be a product of bad writing, or it might just be that it's supposed to be like that. But anyway, regardless, either way, I never really like when Missandei's having sort of her representative scenes. She's much better when she's just being a natural person and interacting with people and not delivering orders and lines and introductions. Of course, it's a big risk for Jon and Davos allowing Dany's guards to take all their weapons. We of course know that Dany, for the most part, is a protagonist or a good person on the side of life and goodness. But they don't know that. The characters in this world don't know that. All they know is that the daughter of the Mad King Aerys, with 3 dragons, wants to meet on Dragonstone, or has summoned them there. And supposedly, at the request of Tyrion. And of course they see Tyrion when they get there, but before that they had no confirmation that Tyrion was actually there. So it was a big risk, but, you know, obviously everyone's glad they made it, because where else would this season have gone? So then, as they make their way up to Dragonstone, Tyrion asks about Sansa's well-being, and again, that just goes to show, like, Tyrion really is a good guy, and if you're not rooting for him by now, then you should be, because he doesn't have to give a crap about Sansa anymore. You know, he did his best to never hurt her, never touch her, never to deflower her or anything like that. He has literally nothing to do with her now, but he's still asking how she is and if she's showing off her potential yet, to which Jon says, yeah, she is and stuff, and Tyrion's like, good. He's, like, honestly one of the purest dudes on the show at the moment. And considering he was the self-proclaimed god of tits and wine, you know, it's a very bizarre sort of combination. And I think, honestly, that Tyrion probably has some of the greatest respect for the entire Stark family out of most people in Westeros. Definitely most people in his family, if not all of them, all of the Lannisters. Which is saying a lot, considering they're supposed to be sort of like mortal enemies now, and that kind of thing, but yeah. And then, I think I mentioned it last episode, how I feel like the episodes are starting to get pretty heavy-handed with the Jon isn't a Stark, and, you know, Jon is Targaryen imagery and symbolism. Tyrion says to Jon, Stark men don't fare well when they travel south. And Jon says, true, but I'm not a Stark. And, you know, of course he's talking about being a Snow, because he's a bastard. And then, of course, right at that moment, we cue a dragon flying overhead. I think it's Drogon, I'm not too sure. And, you know, that's the whole Targaryen symbolism again. And this show used to be really subtle and clever with that kind of thing, and ever since the sort of Tower of Joy reveal, it keeps pushing that fact that he's a Targaryen. And it's honestly like, okay, we get it, like, he's a Targaryen, you're not being as clever as you think you are, kind of thing. And, like, obviously they probably know that they're being very obvious, but when imagery is that obvious, it doesn't really enhance the scenes, you know. It sort of becomes just very in your face, and repeatedly doing it becomes tiresome, especially when we have, like, so little time left this season. We don't need to keep rehashing that he's a Targaryen, that he's not a Stark. I think it's pretty well established by now, you know. The only people that don't know at this point are the people in the show, and that's because they lived the show. That's because they lived it. And, you know, it definitely takes you out of it when there's just very, very highlighted, you know, Targaryen signposting, so I wish they would go back to being a bit more subtle, or doing away with it completely, because we already know that he's a Targaryen. Then we have a very brief conversation between Varys and Mel, the Red Priestess. She says her job's done, I've brought fire and ice, or ice and fire together. And again, subtlety is just out the window at this point. Like, she said it, she said the thing. She said the title. And then Varys is, of course, warning Melisandre not to return to Westeros, as she is headed to Volantis. And actually missed this the first time around, so this was interesting for me. He says, you may not be safe returning to Westeros. And it's very, very, like, not very subtly threatening. And I thought it was pretty out of character hostility, like, Varys has a right to be suspicious of her, but he's being super hostile and really threatening. I was like, whoa, like, calm down, you barely know her. So he probably still suspects that she's up to something by getting the king in the north to come to Dragonstone to meet Dany. But we all, of course, know that that's not true. She also says that she knows she will return to Westeros to die. So, yeah, we have Mel's death coming up, I guess, and it's interesting to theorize at whose hand, by whose hand she will die. It would be interesting to see her sort of join a party as their Red Priestess, like Thoros, but she never typically is on the front lines of combat and that kind of thing, although she did accompany Stannis fairly closely for a while. She also has predicted that she will meet Arya again, and I don't know, I think Arya might not like her. I believe Mel was on her list actually for taking away Gendry. And yeah, I would hate to think what happens if they sort of meet up before Mel has a chance to redeem herself and or explain herself. But yeah, so we have Mel's death coming up, so not particularly good. She also could be doing a sort of sacrificial thing here. A lot of the Lord of Light, a lot of his magic is about dying and rebirth and, you know, sacrificing, and Azor Ahai is about, you know, spearing a woman to temper a sword through her blood. So, I don't know, she could have a pretty important death coming up, but I'm not a good enough writer to be able to make a decent prediction for what that would be. So then, finally, we have an event that has been building for many, many years, since probably the first book came out, the meeting of Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen. And of course, what better way for Queen Dany to introduce herself than to list off one of her 30 titles. I actually did a little bit of maths here, just a little bit. I've written, at this point in the series, I'm sick of hearing every one of Dany's self-appointed titles. It's incredibly egotistical and a waste of my real life time. Not to mention all the time of the characters in the show. We could have had like an extra episode squeezed into all the time she's listed all of her titles. It takes Missandei 20 literal seconds, that's 20 seconds of my time, to introduce Daenerys. Multiply that by 2, because I've watched that episode twice, once for fun and once to write this commentary. And then add every other episode and season where the introduction and title listing takes place. And I've actually lost minutes of my life just hearing Daenerys's bullshit, like egotistical titles. So, please, show writers, can we away with that garbage? Although, Dany still has to meet Cersei and that kind of thing, and of course she's going to want to rattle off a bunch of her titles there as well, so, you know, I guess I should find some sort of activity to do while she's like knit a scarf or something while she's listing off all those titles. It gets very repetitive, and I'm kind of sick of it. On the flip side, it did set up the joke for Davos. This is Jon Snow. He's king of the north, and like us, Davos is like, he's trying his best. I love him. He's such a pure man. But I don't know if that joke was a good enough payoff for the 20 seconds or 40 seconds I lost of my life. And then Jon and Dany talking about, you know, Dany wants Jon to bend the knee, but Jon, I'm the king of the north, Snow. And, you know, we've got some tension here that, of course, we all know that it's sort of fake tension. It's tension for the sake of these characters don't know each other, but we know them very well, and that they will end up being on the same side. So, Dany actually gives us some interesting lore. She says that, I believe Torrhen Stark was the last king of the north, and he swore fealty to Aegon Targaryen and his house in perpetuity. So basically, House Stark was sworn to House Targaryen, which I feel like we don't actually hear about a lot, and as I haven't read the books all the way through, I was pretty interested to learn about Torrhen Stark and his fealty to House Targaryen. So that was pretty cool. Then I have this little note. I don't like Jon's little curly mullet sort of haircut this season. He doesn't look as cool as he did when he was rezzed last season. I think he needs a bit of a haircut, really, like another one. So best better call on some Night's Watch traders to take him out again, just so we can get a haircut for the second time in the show's running. But yeah, that's just a personal nitpick. That's nothing. That's got no substance. So then Danny asks John for forgiveness for her father burning the two Stark men alive, Ned's father and brother. And she specifically says, "I ask you not to judge a daughter by the sins of her father," which was basically the exact thing John said he wouldn't do in Winterfell when it came to taking the castles off the Karstark and Manderlys, I think, the two houses that fought for Ramsay Bolton. John said exactly that thing, like, "I will not judge sons by the sins of their father." And like, I know we're supposed to be getting these parallels, but when you repeat things word for word constantly, like in the last episode I mentioned, Varys and Mel's almost identical backstory, that sob story that they give to Dany, it's not parallels, it's not clever writing, it's very basic and pandering writing, like expecting the audience to not see the parallels kind of thing. So yeah, I don't like when they just rehash the exact same phrases, because I feel it's lazy and condescending to the viewers. So the biggest like point in this scene was that Dany's asking John to bend the knee, but John doesn't want to bend the knee. But my confusion comes from that John doesn't want to be king, and he says so repeatedly, "I didn't choose this, these people chose me to be their leader," and stuff. So I'm not entirely sure why he doesn't just suck it up and bend the knee. The only point I can see is that the Northern Lords wouldn't support Dany or John if he bent the knee. But he still needs her and admits he doesn't even want to be king. It seems like he has more to lose by not bending the knee to her and potentially angering her and not letting him take the dragon glass or use her dragons in the fight than, you know, potentially losing the Northern Lords. When he's proven himself time and again to be a natural leader. So again, I think this lends itself to be tension for tension's sake, but I guess without it we would have even more boring episodes. I just wish it was a bit better written and a bit more believable. But I guess for that to occur we wouldn't be able to know the characters as well as we do. So I suppose they're doing the best they can with what they've got. And I'm probably just asking way too much for a show that's this late into its life cycle kind of thing, that is no longer relying on its excellent source material. So this sort of back and forth between John and Dany continues. We have another boring, self-congratulating, "I had a rough background" monologue from Dany. She goes on for a few minutes about, "I believed in myself, I had faith in myself, like I've been abused and beaten and taken advantage of and all this stuff," and John just perfectly shuts it down. "You'll be ruling over a graveyard if you don't defeat the Night King." And there's sort of a lot of that sort of full stopping, like butting in this season with characters, like cutting off monologues where they can left and right, and just sort of getting to the point. And it's good because it progresses the story a bit, but it's also, it lends itself to the episodes, and makes them feel kind of rushed and impatient, like just as much as the characters are. Then, for a change of pace, Davos starts listing John's achievements, like he took a knife for his men, he died for his men, he brought wildlings and Night's Watch together and all that. And Dany, if you go back and look, Dany just looks bored, and I don't know if that's Emilia Clarke once again sort of having not very interesting acting, or that's how she was written, but now she knows how literally everyone else feels whenever she talks about herself, and wastes literally 20 seconds of their time just introducing herself. Yeah, I couldn't really tell if it was weak acting or if it was poor writing. I'm assuming she just wasn't impressed his achievements until Davos nearly says that Jon died. And I'm not exactly sure why Jon and Davos want to keep his resurrection quiet. I guess for the most part, Jon doesn't want to throw that around and play an I'm invincible card kind of thing in order to get followers. He doesn't need to sort of parade that around like Dany does. But it could also be he doesn't want to tempt people into trying to kill him to sort of see if it'll happen again, if his resurrection will happen again. But yeah, it's sort of been a big plot point this season and in upcoming episodes as well, that he very specifically doesn't tell Dany that he was resurrected and avoids it a lot. And I'm not sure for the exact reason why. And then Davos sort of reiterates. It won't matter whose skeleton sits on the Iron Throne. And I think that's one of my favourite quotes from this season. And it's of course in reference to, if we don't stop the White Walkers, it won't matter who ends up on the Iron Throne when everyone's dead. He gets some very poetic lines, and I'm happy for that. So then Varys interrupts the scene, comes in and whispers in Dany's ear, and Dany dismisses Jon and Sir Davos. And we discover that Varys has heard news that the naval battle has occurred at the end of the previous episode, and only 2 or 3 ships remain of the Ironborn fleet, and the well-being of their allies are unknown. And then we finally get a transition to Theon after the naval battle. He is sort of pulled up onto a ship, much to the disappointment of the rest of the Ironborn. He is being set up for a further redemption arc, if that's even possible, which should be interesting, because Theon is probably one of the most interesting characters on this show, and he's very underrated. The Ironborn are still thinking he's pathetic and he's nothing like his sister, and he's going to need them to sort of get her back at some stage. So it'll be cool to see Theon's sort of second redemption arc after freeing Sansa from Ramsay as Reek. So then we cut to King's Landing, and Euron is parading Yara, Alaria, and Tyene down the streets of King's Landing up to the Red Keep. Oh no, not to the Red Keep, perhaps just to the throne room, where a Cersei Lannister is eagerly awaiting their arrival. So on their way in, Alaria immediately takes note of the mountain, recognises him, of course, just due to his sheer size, I'm assuming, since you can't see his face. And it made me super uneasy, because they were talking about the mountain and killing him before most of the Sand Snakes died in the last episode. And of course the mountain has a reputation for killing Martells, so I really didn't want to see him anywhere near Alaria and Tyene, even though they're pretty much sentenced to death at this stage. There's like nothing stopping them from getting that, unfortunately. And the sort of banter between Jaime and Euron is still entertaining as always. Even though Euron's thick, constantly changing unknown accent breaks through a lot, I still don't understand what accent that's supposed to be. And I don't know if it's the actor trying to put on an accent or if that's his natural accent. But yeah, it doesn't get in the way of the banter, so that's the main problem. But yeah, it doesn't get in the way of the banter with Jaime, so that's the main thing, I guess. Then we have the obviously big revelation that Cersei agrees to marry Euron after the war in return for the capture of the Martells. And, Cersei is in a position where she's definitely more in love with her brother than ever. Well, not necessarily in love, but using and in lust with, if that makes sense. Very close to him anyway. So I very much doubt that Cersei will go through with her marriage arrangement to Euron. either she has him killed or she just outright betrays him at some stage, or maybe the other way around and then she has him killed. But yeah, I very much doubt that this marriage will happen. Or if it does, that it will last any more than like 1 or 2 episodes. So, and more amusing banter between Euron and Jaime. Something about fingers in bums, if I remember correctly. So then, the moment I was nervously awaiting, Cersei takes Ilaria and Tyene down to the dungeons and has them chained up from one another and gagged. And everyone's favourite undead zombie, that's sort of what a zombie is, undead Kingsguard, the mountain, is in the room as well. My heart was racing this entire scene. I did not want the mountain to be involved like this at all. Like, I know I said that I want him to do something. This is not what I meant. So I was very, very nervous for Tyene and Ilaria. And sort of Cersei, does her whole evil villain thing, rubs it in Ilaria's face. She talks about Oberyn being brutally slain. And it was very hard for me to listen to, because when I first saw the Mountain versus the Viper episode, I nearly actually threw up from pure shock and repulsion at the imagery of his death, having his skull crushed. It was intense, and it haunted me for like that entire night while I was at work. So having her bring it back up wasn't exactly pleasant. And then we have some very, very real and powerful acting from Cersei here. I can't think of the actor's name, but she's talking to Ilaria about Marcella. She was mine and you took her from me. Why did you do that? She actually lets herself be a little bit vulnerable there in front of Ilaria. She's not just sort of the evil queen, she's a hurt, upset mother who has lost her daughter, and you can sort of see that reflected in Ilaria. She's like, I think she almost feels a little bad for her, if that's possible, through all the fear and, anxiety that she's feeling at the moment. But I know I certainly actually felt sympathy for Cersei for once, which is just her amazing acting, honestly, because to feel empathy for a heartless villain like that is no easy feat. But finally we have the revelation that Tyene is instead going to be poisoned by Cersei, using the same poison that Ilaria used to kill Marcella, by Qyburn. Qyburn researched it and made a concoction. And you can sort of actually see the poison lipstick on Cersei at the start of this scene if you're looking for it. But yeah, I'm much happier that Tyene was poisoned versus being torn apart by the mountain. But it's pretty tough for Ilaria, having to see your daughter rot in front of you, knowing there's nothing you could do. And it would be cool to see her again sometime this season, but I'm pretty sure the actor said she was done. So I'm guessing that sort of plotline is just sort of done now. We won't see that again, which is a shame, because you would think that since Tyene and Ilaria both use poison a lot, they would have sort of, you can do that thing where you take little bits of poison to build up a resistance to it. You would think that they would kind of do that. But I'm guessing they didn't, because I'm pretty sure their deaths are pretty final now. Which is a shame, because they were probably two of the more interesting sand snakes out of the lot. But yeah, I'm going to assume for now that that's the end of Ilaria and Tyene Martell. So after Cersei finally seeks her revenge for her deceased daughter, we have a Cersei and Jaime scene where Jaime's just cleaning his armor, or he's polishing his sword or something, or his hand I think it was. And Cersei goes up to him and goes in for a big old smooch. And I was like, dude, like, you better make sure that you wiped every ounce of that poison off your lips. Because I know I would be nervous having someone who just poisoned someone by kissing them, following up by kissing me after that. Like, if she missed just a tiny part of the poison, Jaime is either very unwell or, poisoned. So that was dangerous. She likes playing with fire. Wildfire. And then we have sort of a Cersei Jaime love scene. You don't really see anything, it just sort of skips to the next morning, implying that they slept together. And Cersei allows the handmaiden to see that Jaime and her were in bed together, were laying together. She is no longer afraid of what her subjects think of her incestuous relationship. And when people start to not care what other people think, is when they can become very dangerous, because they won't let others' perceptions influence how they act. So if Cersei's getting to this stage, she's sort of becoming a very sort of dangerous woman. She's taking what she wants and basically ignoring what anyone else could say about her, and that's not exactly something that we want to hand Cersei at this stage. So then we follow up with a scene between Cersei and the Iron Bank rep, whose name I still don't know. It's been a season or two since the Iron Bank was involved, so it's good to see that the writers are not just brushing aside these sort of loose ends, they are trying to tie them up. So we get a little update. The Crown is still in a massive debt to the Iron Bank, has not been able to repay much. And, basically Cersei and the Iron Bank rep are talking about how Cersei intends to pay her back. And Cersei she strongly believes that she can win this war, and once she does, she will have all the kingdoms for herself, and she can sort of leech off all the gold from all the kingdoms to pay back the Iron Bank. All she needs is a little bit more time and support from the Iron Bank to win this war. And of course the Iron Bank rep brings up, the Mad King's daughter has 3 dragons, how do you propose to fight that? And Cersei says her dragons are not as invulnerable as some might think. And personally, I believe she's putting entirely too much faith in Qyburn's scorpion. And also, this is, I believe, not the first time that the vulnerability of Dany's dragons has been brought up this season. Which, of course, if we've all seen up to the most recent episode, episode 6, we know exactly why the vulnerability of Dany's dragons was continuously brought up in the episodes prior. So Cersei promises to repay the Crown's debt to the Iron Bank within 2 weeks. So she obviously has a plan to sort of get that gold from somewhere. It'll just be a matter of time before we see what that plan is exactly. So then we cut back to Dragonstone to catch up with Tyrion and Jon. And this is sort of the first real heart-to-heart that Tyrion and Jon have alone together for quite a few seasons actually. And Jon feels like a prisoner on Dragonstone. He's anxious to be moving and acting and fighting the Night King. But instead he's waiting for Dany to decide what to do. And I can really relate to that anxiety, like when you have things you need to be doing and solving and stuff, but you have to wait for someone else. It is almost unbearable at times. So I can very much relate. So then we actually treat it to the revelation that Tyrion actually believes Jon about the White Walkers and the Night King, and this is solely based on Jon's word, and the mutual trust and respect that the two have for each other. There's a lot of bonding between Tyrion and Jon this season, potentially foreshadowing a Tyrion-Jon relationship. Who knows? I know I wouldn't particularly object to it. But of course it doesn't really make sense for the story, so what are you going to do? And then we get the line from Tyrion, children are not their fathers, which is basically sort of the theme for this season. Tyrion killed his own father who, was instrumental in the War of the Five Kings. Jon was not Ned. He is alive for one, he's not as naive. He's a true leader. And Daenerys is not her father. She didn't burn people alive for enjoyment. She doesn't torture people. She tries to do what's right. So yeah, that's basically the tagline for this season. Children are not their fathers. Then Tyrion continues on to converse with Dany. finally, John asks for the dragon glass, like he's been here for, what, a couple of days at least, and finally he asks for the dragon glass. And 3/4 of an episode. So, of course, Tyrion is pushing the point that Dany really should let John mine the dragon glass, because he'd be more likely to bend the knee if he got a little something in return. And he tries to pass off some phrase some sort of wisdom that he comes up with on the spot, and Daenerys is like, "What wise man said that?" And Tyrion's like, "I can't remember." Then he's like, "Are you trying to pass off your own statements as ancient wisdom?" And it was just like a clever little thing, because Tyrion's always spouting, waxing poetical, and it's funny that Dany's onto it straight away. She's like, "Are you just trying to sound super smart right now?" Tyrion's like, "No, wouldn't do that." I like that kind of light comic relief. But he does eventually convince her to allow them to mine dragon glass and, forge a possible allegiance. And Dany actually makes note that Davos was mentioning something about Jon taking a knife to the heart, but Tyrion dismisses it. So I hope the fact that they sort of shushed Davos when he was saying that, and that Dany brought it up to Tyrion later on, I hope there's going to be some sort of big reveal or big resolution to this later, because they're sort of building it up to be a pretty important point in their characters for some reason. So then we have a scene between Dany and Jon watching over the three dragons, and Dany says, "I named them for my brothers Viserys and Rhaegar." Rhaegar is of course Jon's father, and both Viserys and Rhaegar are dead. So, sort of the dragon's namesake's dead, which is kind of lends itself again to the vulnerability of the dragons. They've been bringing up the vulnerability and weakness and namesakes who are dead of dragons a lot. And, yeah, I wonder why. So they continue talking, and the line Dany delivers, "We all enjoy what we're good at." I can't remember quite what the context was, but Jon says, "I don't." And of course, the viewer is understanding Jon to be saying that he's good at killing and fighting, but he hates that he's good at killing and fighting. If he had it his way, he'd be just training fighters peacefully at Castle Black, because if I remember correctly, it was his choice to take the Black, like his Uncle Benjen. Yeah, I think he'd be quite happy just training other Night's Watch men, rather than fighting against the army of the undead, probably. So, I felt a lot of tension in this scene between the two due to the sort of the power struggle. And again, it's mostly false tension, because we know that these characters aren't going to hurt each other, but she does eventually allow him to mine the dragon glass, and actually even provides men and tools, which I think is very generous of her, actually. She didn't have to do that, but she sort of went the whole way. She's not just saying, like, "Fine, you can do it, just, like, stay out of my way." And also bend the knee. She's like, "Okay, I'll allow you to do this, and I'll actually help you do this. Hopefully keep in mind that I want to form this allegiance, and, I want your fealty, basically." And then Jon asks, "So you believe me then about the White Walkers?" And she very obviously does not tell Jon she believes him about the White Walkers. She avoids the question altogether, I believe. And I really feel sorry for Jon, because he must be just incredibly frustrated that one person believes him, apart from, one outside person from outside his immediate group believes him about the White Walkers. But he does take what he can get and decides to mine the dragon glass. So then we head over to Winterfell, and we have a scene between Sansa, Littlefinger, and sort of the caretakers of Winterfell. We learn that there's enough food for Winterfell for 1 year for the current occupancy. And then the Maester actually mentions that the previous Maester Luwin kept a record of every scroll that came in and out of Winterfell, to which Littlefinger pays particular attention, and I actually missed this on my first watch through, but it's a little line that sort of lends itself to, I believe, a scene in episode 5 or 6. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. And Sansa actually starts preparing to stockpile food for the long night ahead, in the event that more Northerners need to take refuge in Winterfell, which is actually a clever plan that I probably wouldn't have ever thought of. She's saying that if they need to leave here in a hurry, they won't be able to bring wagons of grain with them, so they should start sending some now, in the event that people need to stay here. And I believe she even says we'll refund it if we don't need it all. So yeah, she's a pretty good ruler, I'll give her that. She just needs to work on her teamwork and not interrupting Jon, arguing with him in front of all the Lords of Winterfell, all the Northern Lords, sorry, I should say. So as the group continues walking through Winterfell, Sansa notes that there is no leather on the armour being forged, and questions whether it would be more suitable to have leather to keep the men warm in the long night to come. I'm not sure if this is a throwaway line to get the Vale guy to leave her and Littlefinger alone, or if it's going to have some substance to it, and the leather on the armour pays off at some stage. I'm kind of hoping the latter, because we might get to see, some actual army battles as opposed to supernatural fighting. But yeah, for now, it kind of just looks like a way for Sansa and Littlefinger to be alone in this scene. So Littlefinger starts losing his mind. Find every battle, everywhere, always in your mind. And honestly, if this is the show's best attempt at writing clever Littlefinger dialogue, I'm not really impressed. It's pretty nonsensical and meaningless. But it also might just be I'm not a fan of that kind of garbage dialogue. Like, there's no substance to it. He's just trying to be clever and trying to be deep. It's kind of that fake deep that you hear about all the time. So, yeah, I don't know. I really hope that they can come up with some better writing for him before he inevitably dies this season. So, yeah, I'm still putting money on that, by the way. So then Sansa hears that there's someone at the Winterfell gate, and it's revealed that Bran and Mira have finally made it to Winterfell. And it might be because Bran's character has basically bored me from the start. But I barely felt anything at this Stark reunion compared to when Jon and Sansa reunited. Like when they hugged and stuff, there was a great score and stuff, but when she sees Bran, he's just like, hello, Sansa. I'm just like, I don't even like Bran. Who cares anymore, honestly. He was most interesting when he finally got to meet the Three-Eyed Raven, and then lasted a whole of, 2 episodes before he got him killed, so, yeah, I just don't really like Bran, to be honest. And Bran says I need to speak to Jon about his lineage, probably, most likely. So that'll be an interesting conversation to see at some stage. And Bran remarks that he's no longer Bran Stark, but the Three-Eyed Raven. He can't have any lordships, no lands, no ladies, no love for him. So I guess it's not real proper to call him Bran anymore, but the Three-Eyed Raven. But it also kind of explains why he's acting so weird. He's somewhere between unplugging from the Three-Eyed Raven's cave and getting to Winterfell. He's made this complete transformation. And he's being very cryptic and sort of frustrating, and Sansa can't understand what's going on. And he says, I told you it's difficult to explain. And I'm like, it wouldn't be if you actually tried, instead of being vague and monotonous and just a pain in the ass, honestly, like just cryptic for cryptic's sake. I get frustrated with these characters now because it's like, how hard is it to have a conversation? Just tell her everything that's happened and stop being all like high and mighty because, oh, I'm the Three-Eyed Raven, la-di-da-di-da, you know. And then Bran says some pretty inappropriate things to Sansa about how she looked beautiful on the night of her wedding to Ramsay, where he abused her. And it shows that he has like very, very little sentimental attachment to any of his own family now. He truly is the three-eyed raven. He's seen it all. He's seen everything that's happened in the past, and he sees everything that's happening as it happens. And it's honestly, it's probably dulled any sort of emotions that he could have felt. No longer able to sympathize or empathize, just because he's seen centuries of suffering. And he's truly only the three-eyed raven now. There is no sort of Bran Stark left to empathize with Sansa. Which, I don't know, I just said I don't like Bran, but so far I don't really like this new three-eyed raven either, so yeah. Then we head to the Citadel. Sam and Jorah and the Archmaester are checking out Jorah's limbs because it turns out that Sam's treatment did work, which was severely disappointing for me, and for one reason, it really destroyed the severity of grayscale when a simple, well, it looked really simple. It was dangerous and painful, but it was a simple remedy, and it was completely successful. Like, he didn't have to cut off any limbs. There was no mention of the disease coming back. He just looks cured, and it worked on the first go. And like, yeah, it looked painful and kind of gross, but like, he looks pretty damn good for someone who was going to die like 24 hours ago. So you would think that they would actually do that treatment a bit more, because if a young boy can do it on his first go, I'm pretty sure Archmaesters are capable of it too, you know. Yeah, it kind of just really downplayed the severity of grayscale, and it's kind of like, well, what's the whole point of this grayscale being? Just for Jorah to get sent away and come back again to meet Sam Tarly, I guess. I have no idea. And, you know, curing it off screen in less than a day, because, you know, the Archmaester was going to send him off the next day, so it was less than a day that he was cured. It just made it seem trivial and like a common cold, basically. So, yeah, I was pretty upset at that, because I sort of wanted to see more trial and error with that, but I guess I just don't have the time. But I am happy for Sam's success and for Jorah's health, because I do like those characters, regardless of the writing flaws. Then Sam gets the typical, well done, but no reward because you disobeyed my orders speech from the Archmaester, which is a tradition in the Harry Potter universe, so Professor Slughorn fitting right in again. And I was sad that Sam's dream of becoming a maester is so disheartening for him. He was trying to make lemonade with the lemons he was given by being sent to the wall. He wanted to become a maester and study and become a wise man. But it turns out that the lemons were rotten on the inside anyway, and he's scrubbing toilet pots and being forbidden from practicing medical arts and studying, you know, so he's had a rough one, and I feel so bad for him. So we head back to Daenerys and co. Dany wants to crush Euron's fleet with her dragons, because what can anyone do to them? Another mention of the vulnerability of her dragons this episode. That's 3 just for this episode, and we still have, like, 4 episodes to go of the season. So, you know, knock on wood. And finally, the Unsullied arrive at Casterly Rock to invade and conquer. The Unsullied versus the Lannisters wasn't quite the large-scale battle I was kind of looking forward to. But again, I think that's a timing thing. They sort of did a Tyrion voiceover over sort of a montage of the Unsullied taking Casterly Rock. And, of course, Tywin's disrespect of Tyrion once again leads to some Lannister downfall, as the Unsullied use Tyrion's secret passage in the sewer to invade the Rock. And maybe all of this wouldn't have happened if Tywin had just respected Tyrion for the man that he is, instead of treating him as the dwarven monster that he incorrectly assumed him to be. But the Unsullied do manage to take Casterly Rock, not without casualties, of course. And we see a Lannister soldier get pinned to a wall by grey worms at Javelin, which mirrors a Dothraki soldier being pinned by scorpion bolt in the next episode. There's a lot of soldier pinning by giant spears in this season, more so than any other season. I don't know if they just learnt a new technique or something for that, but I ain't complaining. But then, of course, it's revealed that Jaime learned a strategy from Robb Stark and left only a few soldiers to hold Casterly Rock, and marched the rest on Highgarden. And Euron burns the Unsullied fleet, leaving the Unsullied trapped at Casterly Rock. In order to get back to Dragonstone, they would have to trek across a large area of Westeros with no supplies, or very little supplies, so they're not looking to be in a good situation at the moment, the Unsullied. But we catch up with Jaime and Bronn and the Tarleys and the rest of the soldiers marching on Highgarden, with Olenna looking over the sort of balcony in anticipation of the battle to come. And this is sort of where we get the payoff for Jaime and Randall's conversation. In the previous episode, the Tarleys have broken their oaths to the House Tyrell and allied with the Crown, all in the name of being named Warden of the South. Or Warden of the Reach, I can't remember. So yeah, what little respect I had for Randall just went out the window. Jaime enters Olenna's chambers after an assumed battle between the Lannisters and the Tyrell, and she says, did we fight well? And Jaime's like, well, as well as could be expected, and Olenna's like, yes, well, golden roses indeed, we never were much for fighting, and that kind of thing. And Olenna asks about, why did you leave Casterly Rock undefended? We took it. And Jaime reveals that Casterly Rock isn't worth much strategically. It's only worth sentimental value to Jaime. So the Unsullied died for nothing, and now the Tyrell army has been wiped out. And of course, Olenna's throwing shade till the end. Jaime is trying to be merciful here, and she's having none of it. She's sarcastic and cruel and stuff right to the end. And she sort of asks how Jaime intends to kill her with that sword. And she sort of brings up some whereabouts of the Valyrian steel swords, which is a bit of sword name dropping. So we know that the Valyrian steel swords are still sort of with the characters in the show, like the Valyrian steel dagger that's in Winterfell, I believe. I can't remember if we know that yet or not. This is the problem with filming out of order, you see. Jaime's got one. There's one unaccounted for, I believe, Joffrey's sword, I think. No, sorry, I think Jaime has Joffrey's sword, and Jaime gave a Valyrian steel sword to Brienne of Tarth, if I remember correctly. Someone can correct me on that anyway. But yeah, of course they have to sort of be name-dropping these swords for the upcoming White Walker War. Then we have Olenna just begging out Cersei. Cersei's a monster, and these words affect Jaime more than he lets on. And on some level he definitely agrees and knows what she's talking about, but it's a very real thing when you're in a toxic, abusive relationship. It's a lot easier to see on the outside that it's very bad and that you should get out than it is when you're on the inside, because when you're on the inside and you have good days, it's really good. And bad days, you're like, well, it's just a bad day, we'll get through this. But sort of, it's hard to tell for the people on the inside when the bad days are outnumbering the good days, and then it's actually no longer a healthy relationship. And that's where Jaime is. He's a victim of an abusive relationship with Cersei. And she's really dragging him down. He's trying to redeem himself for his sins, and she's not making that easy for him. And he has at least some mercy or redeemable qualities in offering Olenna poison, and a non-painful poison at that. He made sure of it. And, she takes the poison, and Olenna finally reveals that she was in fact the one that poisoned Joffrey, not Tyrion nor Sansa. Which is good for Jaime and Tyrion's relationship, even though Jaime is still angry because Tyrion killed Tywin, obviously, their father, who Jaime actually did respect. But at least that sort of clears his name from the whole Joffrey shabacle. But one final bit of revenge, I guess, Olenna has is spitting Jaime's mercy back in his face, made to regret showing mercy the one time he tries to be reasonable, by revealing that she was in fact the one that killed his son. So, you can see his jaw clench in the anger. He's like, I was trying to do the right thing and you've ruined this as well. Like, you had this coming, but you still made it worse for me again. I was trying to give you an honourable death. So yeah, Jaime is one of my favourite characters at this point. I think when he goes travelling with Brienne, that's when I started liking him. I didn't just see him as a sort of Prince Charming from Shrek character any longer. And I've liked him basically since then. And I do like him with his short hair now, actually, as well. Unfortunately, I believe he and Cersei are fated to die together, which would be a damn shame because, yeah, I've grown very attached to him, even though he's sort of a bad guy. He's a good guy, but doing bad things because he has to. He's a knight, he kind of has to. But that wraps up Game of Thrones Season 7, Episode 3. Overall, I thought it was one of the slower episodes this season. There's a lot of off-screen presumed deaths, like we don't see Olenna nor Tyene actually die. It's just sort of implied that's the end of their plotline kind of thing. Dany took a lot of hits, her fleet got burned, she lost the Sand Snakes, she lost Olenna. There's still nothing happening in Winterfell, really. Bran arrived, but Bran's boring for me right now, so nothing really happening. I wish Jorah's grayscale was taken a bit more seriously. Maybe just one more episode. Like, I think we don't see him again until episode 4 or 5 now, I think. Well, not 4, 5, I think it is, yeah. I don't think we see him until 5, which means they had one more episode that they could have healed him and then he could have travelled, but yeah, they sort of downplayed grayscale a lot. There was a lot of dragon vulnerability questioning, which of course doesn't bode well. There are the early signs of a Targaryen alliance between Jon and Dany, which is interesting. Still no mountain action, which half thankful for, half come on dude, fight a squad, even if it's like a squad of Unsullied that he completely demolishes. I'm okay with that as long as they have a fighting chance and he's not just like tearing apart women, But yeah, overall I wasn't a huge fan of episode 3, but it's still better than like bad episodes of other shows, It's still a really good show. It's like bad pizza is still better than no pizza, if that makes sense. So, yeah. Let me know what you thought of episode 3, A Queen's Justice, in the comments.